Welcome to all the seekers, the dreamers, and the achievers.
We trust everyone is doing very well today. And how are you, Lynette?
I'm doing really well. I actually wanted to explore a concept that you have often spoken about, and that is the concept of living your happily ever after now.
Yes.
Yeah, did you want to expand on that? I do remember at the end of our last session, you said something about growing in joy. That kind of sparked an interest in me.
Yes. So I think part of the mythos of our Western society is this idea of growing through some kind of effort and pain and sacrifice, the path of the cross, the hero's journey, out to slaying dragons. And it all sounds very effortful as opposed to effortless. And my speculation and what I would like to implement in my own life, and what I believe I am managing to implement, is this idea of growing instead through joy and through bliss, through positive experiences. And yeah, it's an idea that resonates very deeply with me. I think we overemphasize sacrifice and efforting in our culture. So for myself, I'm trying a different experiment to grow through, through a path of joy and willful happiness.
That's a beautiful attitude to have. I have to agree that my focus is on moving towards the light, always moving towards the light, and that is joy, that is passion, that is excitement, curiosity sometimes. Though I do have to say there has been times, or a time where perhaps there was a need for me to be brave, but it wasn't about focusing on a fear-based thing. It was focusing on the desire to feel good. And that was at the heart of that. So when there was a time where that energy, that vibration of needing to be brave, for instance, was appropriate, it was only appropriate for the one time in the one situation, so that I could move past something and continue to move towards the joy. But it's been the experience of moving towards joy, constantly focusing or refocusing towards that again and again, that has helped me through something that wasn't about joy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that contrast is certainly valuable. I remember, growing in a family that, to put it mildly, it wasn't a safe family. There was a lot of dysfunction and a lot of, negative behaviors. And the truth is that has given me a framework in my life where I'm always moving up, because it's almost like experiencing that idea of freedom, liberation every day. And I have to thank my parents, because without that contrast and that experience of knowing what I didn't want, I wouldn't be able to have this clear and beautiful experience of freedom every day now. So and yeah, I was actually reminded as well of I was a high school teacher for many years in Western Australia, and one day I was teaching year 10, and I decided to talk about happiness, because it has always been a subject that has resonated with me. And I just took my whiteboard marker and said, okay, so asking the students, what do we need to be happy? And I was just ready with my marker to start a list. And a year 10 girl raised her hand, and I said, yes. And she said, you don't need anything to be happy, miss. You just are. And that's such a valuable lesson from a year 10 student. She was about 14 years old. So yeah, and of course that is the answer right there. There are quotes of a spiritual nature about this, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. So So yes, that idea that you make your own happiness by focusing on happiness moment to moment, it has been very powerful in my life.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about year 10. I remember year 10, my English teacher giving us a task, a composition to do about what we wanted to do when we grew up, or what we wanted to be. I think that's what the title was. And I just wrote about being happy. That was me. It's like, that's all I really want. It wasn't about anything specific. It was always about what it feels like. And I didn't know what that would look like because, well, I was 16 at that point. And I didn't know what happy looked like for me. After I leave home and go and do my own thing, I had ideas of what I wanted to do. But I guess the question of what do you want to be kind of evoked that out of me. So it's not so much about the doing, it's about the being. It could have been a clue right there and then.
Yes, and I believe that you are certainly not alone in that understanding. There is an anecdote that is told about John Lennon. It may be apocryphal, but it's around those lines as well, that he was asked by a teacher, what would you like to do or to be when you grow up? And he said, yeah, something like that, I want to be happy. And the teacher said, oh, you don't understand the question. And he said something like, you don't understand life. So anyway, that may or may not be a real an anecdote that happened in John Lennon's life. But I think if we listen to children, a lot of them, have a much clearer understanding of what life is about, without goals, but more with, reaching for that feeling rather than a specific goal. I think is very valuable.
We also touched on practicality last time we spoke. So how do we live in the happily ever after now? Do you have any ideas, inspirations, insights?
Yes, I think at any given moment we can take our attention and our consciousness and our mental energy in many directions, almost infinite directions. So for myself, what I have determined to do is to have a positive bias. So if it's a person that is in front of you, find and dwell on the positive aspects of that person. If it's a situation, again, try to find the best positive, most life-affirming, and most hopeful aspects of any situation. And of course, this can become a bit challenging. Not every situation lends itself easily to, to extract really positive aspects, but it's such a powerful tool, and it's only a negative experience if you let it be that, and it's only a failure or a mistake if you don't learn from it. So it's always trying to put that positive bias, that positive spin into everything. It's a bit of, positive manipulation of reality.
Well, I have to admit, I've always had that positive bias, but it has got me into trouble.
Right.
Because when you're talking to someone, or if you happen to be in a committed relationship with someone who has more of a negative bias, I can remember my very first partner quoting to me often, it's Murphy's Law, if it's going to go wrong, it will go wrong.
Right.
So that was his attitude. So we would get in many an argument because I failed to acknowledge his negative perspective, which I have to admit I saw it immediately and understood it. But because I was positively biased, I didn't acknowledge him in his perspective.
Right.
And so he wasn't seen by me. And I realise that now, years later, that it's important to actually stop and pause. It's something I failed to do.
Yeah.
And just allow the person to be where they're at. And he just always took it as I'm trying to change his mind or trying to stick up for something else or someone else. So it did actually get me into trouble, and it took me years to understand. It really wasn't until after we broke up and I started on this journey that I could see both the blessing and the curse of having a positive bias.
Yes, it can certainly be for someone that is going through a negative experience or may have a pessimistic view of life, it certainly can be annoying to have someone, with you that always has this rosy outlook. It certainly can be challenging. So, but I'm sure you planted some seeds there, and I think we always end up being teachers and guides to each other. So I'm sure that eventually, he gained probably quite a lot from having been with someone.
I think we both learnt a lot from each other and realised that we're actually both saying the same thing. We're just coming from the opposite side, because we actually agreed on a lot of things. We were just coming from a very different vibration. I recognise that now that I understand energy a lot more and vibration. That I was in a different vibration. I was in the positive more readily, and I did fail to just acknowledge where he was at and make it okay for him to have his point of view, and he also failed with me. So, but we did both learn. We definitely both learned from that, and I have to thank him because I really understand that perspective and that energy, especially since I've understood myself as vibrational, and I understand that if you're not in a vibration that is of that happy, you've got to start from where you are. And that's why just before I said, if you really need that energy of being brave, if that's where you're at and it's better than feeling fear, then you're actually on the positive path. You're actually pointed towards the positive. And that's the thing to recognise, where we are at individually at any given time.
Right. Yeah, that's actually very interesting, that that anger, that turning against things is actually a higher vibration than the vibration of powerlessness and fear and depression. So there is certainly a lot of emotional energy that can be channeled positively in anger. If it's a bit of kind of vibrational jiu-jitsu that needs to be done there, but certainly energy that can be transformed and transmuted into something positive. Well, it's very interesting to me, Lynette, that you have this naturally, that that positive bias comes naturally to you. I think that is a great way to be. For me, it's not like that. I have a naturally more pessimistic disposition, and again, I think a lot of it was probably formed by my family of origin. But I think it's very valuable to just act as if. And then, it almost becomes a reflex. It's like anything you practice, it's that muscle that gets strengthened every time that you refocus away from having a negative attitude towards something, towards finding something positive that you can use and be okay with. So I practice that. It doesn't come easily for me, but I think both ways are valid, and the fact that it's possible to teach yourself to have a more trusting and positive outlook is fascinating. I realized there were times in my life where I didn't even see that as a possibility, and I do now. So yes, I think that is a journey that we're all on.
Well, having said that, I have always had that positive bias. I have to admit that when I really started to listen to my own internal conversation and notice where I'm at any given time, I realised there was a lot more negativity happening within my head than there was with the people I was having conversations with. So I realised that inside me I was more negatively biased than I had realised. So, a lot of valuable lessons along the way, definitely.
Yeah, and you bring a very important point, which is that that importance of monitoring our own inner dialogue, the way we talk to ourselves. Very often we wouldn't talk like that certainly not to a good friend, not to a family member, not to even a stranger, would we say some of the things that we say to ourselves. So practicing that compassion and that positive bias with ourselves as well is part of this, for sure. Yeah.
and it's very revealing. It teaches us a lot. So I guess that's one thing I would say is part of my practice, to be aware of what's actually going on in my head. And the way I do that is to tune into my body and notice what I'm feeling, and understanding that that is an energy and a vibration. And if it's feeling unpleasant, I often will immediately notice the thought that is in a negative direction. Not always, sometimes it kind of fools me and eludes me, but I trust what my body is telling me, and I shift my thoughts and my perspective accordingly, because I don't want to follow that path of going back into the dark or leading towards the dark unnecessarily. If it's there, I'll deal with it, but I much prefer to walk the path of joy and happiness.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember reading a book that was very powerful at that time for me in my life. It's by Rudolf Steiner, who is, the person that founded the Steiner schools. He's a very well-regarded German teacher and scholar and mystic, and he has a book titled "How to Know Higher Worlds," and he recommends a practice that he calls Michaelic yoga. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but it's a yoga in the sense of a spiritual practice, not in the sense of a set of exercises, and it has to do with Archangel Michael. So this idea that Archangel Michael is the first emanation from God, the first personal being that emanates from the source of love and light. And his idea is that it's almost like there is no God unless we create God in this world. So he recommends this practice of looking at everything, whether it's a flower, of other people, situations, with the eyes of either God or Archangel Michael, or whoever is for you the representation of love and light and compassion. So it's almost like bringing spirit from wherever spirit is down to the practical level of this world. So it's a very powerful practice, to look at everything with the eyes of spirit, with the eyes of an all powerful and all benign being. And it's this idea that the only positive that is going to be in this world is going to be here if we bring it into this world. So it has been a powerful practice for me in my life.
Well, understanding that we are naturally creators, it makes sense that if we want to create happiness and joy in our life, then that's where we need to be focused, that we are the ones creating it.
That's right. That's right. And it's a very powerful idea that if that God needs us to be, His eyes and His hands, and so whatever positive is going to come into this world, it's not going to come from the outside; it's going to come from us. So it's also finding that divine presence within, and living as if you were a real avatar, a real representation of that divinity. How would you look at people and things and situations? That is a very powerful practice, one that I don't attain all the time, but certainly very aspirational for me, and something that I like to practice as much as I can.
You have to practice it. Now, I guess that's always my message to people, because it's been what I've realised. You have to practice what you want to be, and then you become it.
That's right.
So it just becomes easier. It becomes more natural, and it may take effort in the beginning, but it really is a very simple concept that is profound, and it works. And it gets easier if you do practice. It's like any skill.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That compassion has to be, certainly for others, but for ourselves as well. That we can see our flaws, and we can know they are there, but we can have compassion for them, and we can understand that all it means is that there is growth to be done. We can grow, we can change, and we can grow. And to, like you say, practice being something before you're it, starting to act as if, can be a very powerful spiritual practice.
And growing through joy.
That's right.
Yes.
So yes, to all of you that are listening, we would like to put this question: what is your path of joy? In what ways can you grow in your life that don't depend on the classic taking on big challenges, overcoming big obstacles? What are the ways that are available to you in your life to grow through bliss, through joy, to focus on happiness so that happiness becomes your way? We would love you to comment, and we would love to hear your ideas, because we are growing in this space as well.
Is there a particular thing you like to do that brings you joy every time you do it?
Yes. Well, certainly, since I got my dog, Falkor. Falkor is named after a mythical dragon from the book and the movie The Never-Ending Story, a white flying dragon. So there is certainly magic in animals. There is the magic of them naturally living in the present moment and being able to unabashedly, without reservation, throw themselves into whatever joy the moment brings. So certainly being with him is one of the things. And just my, the classic introverted pursuits of doing jigsaw puzzles, reading in the bathtub, swimming, being with water. I am classic Pisces mentality. It's all about water for me. So yeah, there are different. There are definitely many things that I can tap into and create that experience right away, that reservoir of joy in my life. And how about you, Lynette?
Yeah, interesting you say jigsaw puzzles. I used to do it many years ago, and it was a way of, when I couldn't meditate, it was a way of focusing and a way of just putting me into, a non-thinking state. I was focused on, the particular task at hand. And anything that gives me focus is where I'll find joy. So if it sparks my interest or my curiosity, there's definitely, I will find joy there. I'm exploring neurographic art at the moment,
right,
for various purposes, but I'm actually using it for myself to work through nerve pain. And it's a particular process that comes from something that's come out of Russia. A Russian psychologist created something called neurographica. But from that, the principles of the neurographica, which works on evoking things within the subconscious, the principles of that is, there's a whole movement called neurographic art. And so I'm exploring that for myself, which is something when I'm learning or I'm interested, or it gives me something more. So I'm doing it to help me just move through nerve pain. I'm wanting to recondition my nervous system, basically. Right. And I find it's working. So anything that I'm focusing on that evokes interest and curiosity, that's one thing.
Right.
And of course, I love water as well. I love nature. I just like to sit and breathe sometimes and just feel what I'm feeling and redirect my thoughts. So there's lots of little practices I have moved into over the last 10 years that I didn't necessarily do before, or I did, but I didn't understand, and I didn't going for walks and stuff. I didn't necessarily pursue that often enough with the attitude of, I know this will put me in joy, and being in joy is a good energy to be in.
Absolutely. So how does the practice of neurographic art, what does it look like exactly? What do you do?
You draw, there's a few different techniques, but you're basically drawing lines, just letting the pen be guided, and they can crisscross all over the paper, and then everywhere, the idea of when there is a line, energy flows along lines, and anywhere that another line intersects a line, it represents where there's a blockage and it stops. So you basically round the edges off at every intersection, so that then the energy can either move around to the other line or keep going straight across because of the rounded edges. And it's that rounded edges at everywhere where there is an intersection that keeps the energy flowing, that when you look at the end result, you can often you find a harmony that you can feel in it. It's quite soothing. It's a mindfulness technique, and I always find a message from my subconscious. So there's always this, and so instead of trying to find a reason for something, if I'm just not feeling 100% or a bit bored or whatever, I can just simply start drawing. That will refocus me, and then I look at it and I see a message from the subconscious, and knowing that the subconscious really thinks in images and pictures, it's a better way of journaling recently for me.
Wow.
That I don't need to use words, or I don't need to have an idea of anything or go down a thought pathway. Right. It's just, I'm going to enjoy this process, and look, I found some meaning in this.
That's fascinating. And that's right. The language of the subconscious is symbols. It's not words. It's not any type of language other than, the language of symbols. That's fascinating. I actually went to university in Russia, and I was very interested in all this because there is a great tradition in Russia of studying, the subconscious, and to the degree that they used to have a degree on parapsychology in Russia. So I actually went to Russia in the 80s with the idea of studying parapsychology. And everyone in my, the Spanish students that came with me were laughing at me because, I wanted to study parapsychology. I went to Russia with the Ouija board, the traveling Ouija board. So I was very interested in all that. And then at the time, it was still a country that aspired, to this ideal of communism. So there were some contradictions in the way that they taught psychology at the time. A lot of it was very, based on this idea of philosophical materialism. So, and yet, they were very interested in the subconscious and all these techniques. So it's a fascinating country, and I'm sure that that technique is very powerful because it comes from that great reservoir of, this historical interest in these things. Yeah.
Yes, my awareness of their openness to all things spiritual and the science that they pursue because of it is it began many years ago as well. So I'm always interested when I hear of something coming out of Russia, because I know that the attitude is, well, there's something to learn here. There's a possibility here, and it's fascinating to me.
Absolutely, and I think that is going to be, the science of the new millennium is going to be all about that, about exploring consciousness, exploring the deepest spaces of our own mind. And I suspect that at some point that will intersect with traditional science, and some points of, union, and some intersections will be found, between traditional science and the science of the mind and the deep consciousness, and in the end it's all one thing. I suspect that will be found out at some point.
Yes, I believe that there's a lot of awareness there, but it hasn't seeped into the main consciousness in a lot of ways. And also there's a lot of beliefs people don't even realise they have that hold them against finding answers, even when they're open to finding answers. So that's a whole another subject, the subconscious and beliefs.
Absolutely. Perhaps for another day. We are approaching the half-hour mark. So we just want to remind you today of a powerful thought that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. And please tell us in the comments what sorts of ways of growing through joy, growing through bliss, through happiness have you found that will put you on this path of even more happiness, even more growth through this path of bliss. Let us know in the comments. Anything else, Lynette?
Happy to be here and happy to return again.
Excellent, and we shall return again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and bye.
Have a great day.